Hello and welcome back everyone, we Weeb Online, and today I'm gonna continue the story What If Naruto Mastered How to Edit Scenes, Part 9. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and to watch more videos like this, subscribe to my channel and turn that bell notification on so you never miss an upload. Now wasting no more time, let's begin.
It had been months, many months, in fact, it had been well over a year, and yet she had absolutely nothing of value to show for it. It paid well, and she was able to train to get back to her old level of skill and even go a little further, but that wasn't what she wanted. She must have been the worst spy ever because, despite her disguise, she had nothing to spy on. At this point she had little more than names for the members of this organization and who knew how many underlings were in the village alone. She was sure that they had spies all over the world who were telling them about anything remotely interesting. If the daimyo of Kaminari no Kuni choked on his yakitori during lunch, Pain would probably know about it. She doubted he really cared, but he would know nonetheless. Even though she would like to say otherwise, that was a lot better than her own work. Even Pain and Zetsu were supposed to know more than her, but she didn't know why they were supposed to be capturing Biju. If you believed Pain, it had something to do with world peace, but that was silly. No, Zetsu had talked about the Jubi, which was the first Biju, but what was the point? Madara, or at least the fool who said he was Madara, was supposed to come back to life later, but once again, no one told her why. She didn't see why she should be brought into this plot to have yet another person work in Akatsuki's shadows when no one would tell her what needed to be done. She had to briefly wonder if Zetsu couldn't use the resurrection technique or if Madara just wanted a Uchiha to bring him back instead of a talking plant. For that reason, she really wouldn't blame him. She thought it was also possible that he didn't fully believe that the plant would try to bring him back. She didn't know why the two of them were working together or what their history was, just like she didn't know a lot of other things about this plan. Luckily, she could comfort herself by thinking that even if she didn't think Naruto would be all that interested, and she had joined this group to keep an eye out for him anyway. So far, it didn't look like they would be a direct threat to him, unless they tried to use him to find his sister, in which case they wouldn't have a good reason to kill him. If you caught him, she would pay attention, but if you kept him alive, she might relax. Once they had her, they didn't really need him any longer. Chances were good that they'd let him go, but if they didn't, she could always step in and take him for herself. Only Zetsu would object to that, and the only reason was because he wanted to eat his body. But as long as she was still alive, there wouldn't be a body, so Zetsu would have to look elsewhere if it came to that. The whole point of this, though, was to stop something like that from happening. But for that to work, she had to tell him where they were going, which was one of her biggest problems. They were just sitting there. A bounty here, a mission for a village there. Nothing they've done so far has been for any reason other than to get more money. Oh, Naruto-kun, today we killed a jerk for money, isn't that exciting? Like that would help the boy in any real way. No, she didn't have anything valuable to send the boy. She could, however, give the names of the people in the group and their general goal, no matter how stupid it sounded. She might be able to say a little about each person's personality and a little about why they did what they did, but even that would be mostly guesswork. She thought it was still better than nothing. He still needed to get the letter, but she could figure out a way to do it. After all, almost anything was better than spending all day in that stupid tower. Hyuga Neji was known for one thing: he believed in fate. Now, the Hyuga's belief in fate wasn't unusual. They all believed in it to some degree, just as they had for a very long time. How else could they have stayed so strong for so long if it wasn't in their destiny? No, he wasn't crazy for believing in fate. What made him different from other people was how seriously he took his beliefs. Even the most devoted believer in fate couldn't be compared to Neji. It would be like comparing a fanatical zealot to someone who had never heard of fate. In his faith, he was the only one. By itself, that wasn't a bad thing. In fact, everyone in the main family thought it was a good idea, and it wouldn't be looked down upon in the branch either. Still, there was another problem. Neji didn't just believe in fate, he thought he knew what fate wanted to happen. Almost like some kind of prophet. But he wasn't a prophet, which everyone except him knew. Again, this was good for the main family because he stayed loyal to them because he thought it was their destiny to lead him and his friends from the branch family. However, he wasn't very liked by his friends from the branch family. When he wasn't around, there were a lot of whispers about how he was the elder's pet. And, sadly, it wasn't just the branch family that talked about it. Even though this might seem sad to someone on the outside, she didn't mind it at all when she ran into him while she was walking around the compound. He bowed to her before he could even see her face. Just hearing the voice was enough for him to know who was talking. Hanabi-sama. She could tell from the way he said it that he was angry, and it was hard for her not to laugh at the pathetic creature in front of her. He was supposed to be a noble and proud Hyuga, but all he did was sit by their feet like a dog. Worse of all, he could have been like the other people in his branch who served with pride and honor, but his own prideful beliefs held him back and tied him to the people he hated the most. It made her laugh and laugh. Tell me, Neji, have you noticed anything strange about your branch members lately? When I reminded him of his position, he scowled even more, but he answered anyway. I have to say that they have been acting strangely as of late. And you probably don't know why now, do you? No, Hanabi-sama, I wouldn't, she said. This made her lips turn into a small frown. Neji wouldn't dare lie to anyone in the main family, especially not to her or her father, so he must have been telling the truth. She was hoping it would be easier for her to figure out what was going on. Maybe that was a mistake. Even though it would take longer, it would still be easy. That's bad and wrong. Something isn't right, and I want to know what. I'm leaving this up to you, Neji. Any other jobs you had before don't matter anymore unless they come from my father. I want an explanation soon. Of course, Hanabi-sama, she said with a quick nod. Is that all? He asked with a deep bow. Then you may go. As she watched him leave, she couldn't help but wonder if he was the right person for the job. He was loyal, but he wasn't liked by the people he would need to be close to in order to find out what she wanted to know. After using the cage bird seal a few times, maybe one of the maids could be made to talk. It would definitely be faster, but it would also make things way too easy for her cousin. She would have to wait to use that plan until after he had failed his task and been punished for it. And what if he did figure it out for her? Well, he should have known better than to keep her waiting, since she would just have to teach him again. It had all fallen apart, and Kushina knew deep down that she should have known it would. He was right, of course. She didn't look into the situation nearly as much as she should have. Instead, she just jumped in headfirst based on what she had heard from other people. They all didn't think enough of her son, so she did too. And because of that, she deserved to fail with the Yamanaka. She accepted it, and now she had to find the people who had really made things hard for her family. She could now see that the Mindwalkers had been way too obvious. Even though Ino was terrified at the thought of being given to Naruto, and even more so when he pulled her into his lap, it was clear that the clan wasn't going to do anything to stop him and that he didn't mind that the clan was broken. Obviously, if she couldn't blame the Yamanaka for her son's distance from his family and giving them to him wouldn't bring them back together, then someone else had caused her family to be split up. Kushina thought that there was only one person who could have done what happened. Senju fucking Tsunade. She had left Naruto in Konoha, trusting that the slug Sanin would keep an eye on his health and let her know what was going on. Instead, the woman kept quiet, and Naruto not only went to the hospital twice, but he also started a small war in Konoha. Kushina wanted to know why. She had been on the path to the Senju compound so many times that she didn't even have to think about where she was going. Her feet just took her there. As it seems, too, just in time. Kato Shizune, who worked for Tsunade, was just leaving the compound when she got there. She was looking at a piece of paper in her hand, which was probably a list of things she needed to buy, so she didn't see Kushina suddenly disappear and appear next to her, holding the gate open. Good morning, Shizune-san, she said. The way she said it was happy, but something about it made the shocked doctor nervous. Oh, Kushina-san. I'm sorry, I didn't see you there. She took a moment to notice that Kushina was keeping the compound gate from closing, and she almost sighed with resignation. That's fine, Shizune-san. Is Tsunade free? The smile on her face was usually friendly, but the young woman thought it looked very mean today. She should be. She hesitated and thought about the situation. She should have been helping Tsunade stay away from the woman since Tsunade was her master, but she had put this off for too long. The sooner they were done with this, the sooner they could turn their attention to something important, like Naruto. The gods above them seemed to have forgotten what this was all about. Why don't you just go in? After so long, I'm sure she'd be glad to see a familiar face. Kushina knew that the doctor wouldn't be able to stop her, or even try to. She knew that the woman had no chance against her, so she gave her a much nicer smile. I think I'll do that, Shizune said. Have a nice day, Shizune-san. Take some time for yourself. Tsunade and I have a lot of catching up to do. The last part was almost growled, but Shizune didn't say anything about it. Yes, I've been pretty busy lately. Maybe I'll go see some friends. With that, the apprentice of the slug Sanin quickly ran away. Kushina smiled happily when she saw the medic running away. She thought she was a nice girl before, but after that she liked the young woman a lot. She might be able to get Tsunade to give Naruto her apprentice as a way to make things right. Shizune was a pretty young woman with a good head on her shoulders. If she lived near her son, it would be much easier for her to get back into his life. She put that thought with the other ideas she had about her son's return and turned her attention back to the task at hand. Once more, her smile turned mean. It was time to have a quick talk with Tsunade. The gate to the compound shut behind her with a satisfying click, and she crossed the stone path to the main building of the Senju compound in almost no time. As expected, the main room and kitchen were empty, but so were Sanin's office and bedroom, where she thought he might be sleeping it off. Yes, that was something new. Since she had known the woman, she had either fallen asleep at her desk, surrounded by empty bottles, or made it to her bed, usually with Shizune's help, and slept until the morning. Hope this just means that Tsunade is awake and not that she got away while Shizune was talking to her. If that was the case, though, she had to give the young medic credit for being able to act friendly even though she was working against her. She would be mad at the girl, but she would still like her a lot. After all, not many people were willing to go up against the matriarch of the Uzumaki clan, especially when they knew they were outmatched. Yes, she'd be very angry, but Shizune's actions would only make her respect him more. She didn't need to think about that, though, because when she went into the back garden, she saw the woman she was looking for. Tsunade sat on the back porch with her legs crossed and her eyes on the Senju gardens. As expected, she had a drink in her hand, but Kushina found it hard to believe that it wasn't sake. The Uzumaki couldn't remember ever seeing the woman drink anything else, not even water, but here she was with a cup of tea. She was angry at first, but then she felt confused and couldn't believe what was happening. For a moment, she wondered if she wasn't caught in some strange genjutsu. A pulse of chakra told her that this was real, that she was dreaming, or that she was in a genjutsu from which she could never get out. She couldn't choose which thought made her feel better. I'm going to assume it's you, Kushina. Tsunade didn't turn to look at her, but Kushina didn't need to see her face to feel the air of defeat around her. She thought it was strange that the last Senju's sense of defeat had nothing to do with the fact that she had been found. Yes, she said, her eyes getting smaller as she thought about how angry she was. Whether it was a dream or a real event, it was this woman's fault that she no longer had a son. She put that idea out of her mind right away. She still had a son, but he didn't live with her. She would change that, though. Soon. Already, it had been way too long since she had held her baby. The day after they left Konoha, it had already been too long. Now, after more than 4 years, she couldn't think of anything else she wanted more. The woman sighed deeply and said, "Then this must be about Naruto. I probably should have asked Shizune to stay, since she's seen the kid." Kushina's eyes started to turn red. "You mean you haven't seen him in 4 years?" The hiss that came out of her mouth would have embarrassed Orochimaru and all of his summons. "Never," she said. She didn't even try to deny it. "I've heard Shizune has met him a few times. Supposedly, they get along well. I didn't know she knew him until recently," she said with a dry laugh. "At first, I was angry, because I thought she would bring him here because she knew I needed to see him. But I can't blame her for not bringing him, and I can't even blame him for not coming. Did I really think he wouldn't be suspicious of a Sanin he didn't know who wanted to meet him?" Her blood kept boiling as Tsunade's calmness took the red out of her vision. She thought it was funny that Naruto already knew Shizune and that giving her as a gift would probably go over just as well as giving the Yamanaka heiress. "So you didn't even look?" Tsunade shook her head, but she still didn't turn around to look at the woman. "No, I didn't get there on time because some collectors were after me. By the time I got there, Naruto was in the hospital, and I didn't find out for a long time." She laughed. "I found out about that because of Shizune. I thought he lived in the compound until she told me about a thief she met while shopping." "A thief? My son was turned into a thief?" Tsunade let out another snort. "Reduced? No, Shizune told me that the kid was very skilled in a natural shinobi. She was impressed with him, and I was scared." Kushina said, "But you just sat here in the compound and did nothing." She was used to the Sanin getting angry quickly. Was the fact that she was drunk enough to keep her cool when her mother was angry? Even though Kushina wanted to scream and attack the woman, she couldn't give in to her anger because even the most angry Sanin was sitting still in front of her. "I did something, but for all the good it did, it might as well have been nothing. Kurenai and I had a fight about who was supposed to take care of the kid. In the end, we decided that the kid could take care of himself, but he needed someone to keep an eye on him. I think that was your plan. Kurenai was going to bring the kid here when she found him so he could live with us. I wasn't going to baby him or even get close to him. But he didn't come here once, did he? Tsunade said, no, I don't know what happened on Kurenai's side because I haven't talked to her since. I can't believe you. He's your godson. How can you sit there so calmly and tell me you didn't do anything to help him? Because it's true. I should have checked on him and then left him to his own devices, but I didn't. Every day I put it off, my guilt grew a little bit, so I drank more to make up for it. By the time I realized what I was doing, I had wasted away years. Kushina growled, I could have been okay with that. It would have been better than nothing, but you didn't even check on him. That's why I asked you to come, to make sure he was okay. He wasn't. Those 2 words stopped Kushina in his tracks. The next one made her fall down. When you left, things got worse. No, it couldn't be. What? She wouldn't accept it. She left to keep him safe from the Kyuubi's chakra and any damage it might have done to his chakra system. It was too late to stop him from being affected, and it was always too late. 2 years ago, he went through chakra withdrawal, and Yukushi Kabuto checked on him. His body was dependent on the chakra of the Kyuubi because he was born to a Jinchuriki. And no, I'm not sure if it was good or bad that you locked him out of the compound. It said that some of the Kyuubi's chakra from the defenses ended up in his seal, which is why he was able to go for 2 years before he died of withdrawal. If he had access to the compound, he wouldn't have made it, but we would have known sooner. You would have been back. Kushina didn't pay attention to the way that seemed to say it was all about her. Even if the compound hadn't been locked, Tsunade would have been able to figure it out. That's why she was back in Konoha after all these years. In fact, it was good that she forgot to add Naruto to the compound after the reset because it kept him going for so long while she was gone. She smashed the part of her brain that reminded her that Tsunade had just said that the 2 years wouldn't have been necessary if he hadn't been attacked by the security features of the compound. Then she jumped back up, her anger rising again. If you had just checked on him like you were supposed to, I would have been back, she said. It was just as true as what Tsunade had said. In reality, they were both wrong, so they were both right. Only one of them had accepted what had happened. That first day, you would have picked him up from the academy, looked him over, and called me. You could have even sent Shizune after us, and we would have been back by the next morning. At this point, does it really matter? It's over, and we can't change that. Oh, you're just going to forget about it. Well, this is your fault. Tsunade shot back, and what do you want me to do? Ever since I realized how bad my mistakes were, I've stopped drinking and tried to think of a way to make things up to him. At this point, there's nothing I can do. I might have had a chance if he had known about me before you left. Shizune says he didn't know I was his godmother. Maybe if he had, she could have gotten him to come visit me at least once. But I've already said that there's nothing we can. Kushina kept saying, look at the mess you've made. When you came back, you were supposed to introduce yourself to him. If I hadn't asked you to come back, you probably wouldn't have, and we both knew it. He probably wouldn't have met you, and bringing it up would have made him suspicious. And I had nothing to do with my arrival. What are you going to do now? Go find the debt collectors and blame them for everything. None of this was planned, but it happened anyway. Getting mad at me doesn't help Naruto or you. You think I'll just forget about all of this? Forget that your inaction cost me my son? Your love for your son cost you him. You were in such a hurry to make sure he was safe that you left him more vulnerable than ever. We're both to blame, because between the two of us and a lot of bad luck, Naruto has ended up suffering. I helped him in every way I could, and that wasn't enough. I lost him too. He was my godson, and I could have had another family member. But I was afraid to make new connections, so I lost that chance. You, on the other hand, still have a chance. Don't waste it by worrying about me. Go get your son back. Tsunade didn't have to look at Kushina to know that her eyes were getting smaller. I'll do it, and I promise you that after I do it, you'll never see any Uzumaki again, she said, and then she ran out of the compound. Tsunade was still facing the garden, so no one could see her tear. Naruko had to admit that whatever she had been expecting, this was much, much worse. Tizuna had talked about how tightly Gato held the country, but she hadn't really thought about what these people were going through. Broken streets were full of both trash and homeless people. The houses that were still standing were falling apart, and the people who didn't have homes huddled together and tried to make do with whatever they could find. There was a lot of sadness in the air, just like she could smell thick, oily smoke coming from somewhere she couldn't see. Hope and fear lit up everyone's eyes when they heard them, but in the end, nothing was done about them. She muttered, "This is awful." The woman she was with, Tsunami, was their client's daughter, and all she could do was nod. Gato has been destroying this country, and he's not likely to stop anytime soon. When he's bled us dry, he'll tear everything down and rebuild it the way he wants. How can he do this and get away with it? He runs the economy here, and the daimyo has been quiet since before he came. No one is going to stop him as long as he doesn't start killing people in public. So he kills you all slowly. At first, he gave us the chance to leave, but most of us couldn't leave our homes and all that we and our families had worked so hard for over generations. I can't help but think it would have been better that way. Naruko said, "You can't just give up. And we didn't, but now that our hope is gone, many have. The difference is that if we had left sooner, we'd already have new lives somewhere else. We wouldn't be suffering, and neither would our children. There's nothing wrong with giving up if it's better for you and your family in the end. Who can count all the people who gave up their own dreams to help those they cared about?" "I guess you're right," Naruko said with a frown, "but I still don't like it." "We don't like it either, but it could be worse." "How could it be worse?" "He hired an A-ranked treasonous shinobi from Kiri to find your father and kill the last chance your country has of ever getting better. How could that be worse?" Tsunami stopped in the street and turned to look the young girl in the eyes. "I could be a slave right now and be violated for the pleasure of those who are destroying our country. Inari could be in a labor camp or be used as a practice dummy by Gato's forces. They could torture families in front of each other while having their way with the women. Our homes could be set on fire while we shiver together at night. No, things could be much worse if Gato's men weren't kept under such tight control." As Naruko tried to understand what had just been said, there was silence between them. All of those were much worse than what was going on, but would people really treat each other that way? She liked to think that everyone had some good in them, even if it was just a little bit. But when Tsunami said things like that, it was clear that not only were there people who would do that, but there were many of them around them as they talked. It did not make me feel better. "So Gato is in charge of them?" "No," Tsunami said, shaking her head. Then she and her friend started walking again. She then pointed to a man walking down the street while wearing a mask. "It is." Another man who looked the same was walking in the opposite direction, and as Naruko and the other man looked around the town, she noticed more of the same men sitting on random buildings. Two more joined a small group of thieves at one of the collapsed homes further up the street. Several people from the village stood by the doorway and talked with the lead thug. They probably represented the different families who had taken shelter there. She was very aware of the small bags that the villagers were handing to the man. The man weighed them in his hands, then grinned, barked with laughter, and threw them to his friends. When they turned, the group moved away, but they stopped at the next house and did the same thing again. "Who is it?" "The wolves," said Tsunami in response. "Gato hired them before he hired Zabuza." "Why do they work for Gato?" Tsunami shrugged because she didn't have a good answer. "I guess he pays them. There may be more to it, but the main reason people work for other people is to put food on their tables." "But why would they keep the others in line if he pays them?" "No one knows for sure. They work for him, collecting Gato's taxes and going after those who oppose him, but some people say the wolves help them at some point. They know Gato is in charge of this area, but they try to make sure the people who live there don't get taken advantage of by Gato's hired muscle." "But what if Gato ordered it?" "I would expect them to tear through everything here like a real pack of wolves and eat everything in sight. They are Gato's enforcers, but they are a fair group who keep our small town running. If it weren't for them, most of these families would have already been dragged away for one reason or another." "But why should they care?" "If I had to guess, I'd say it's because they want to keep their jobs. The longer they're needed, the more they get paid in the end." "Just for money? All of this? That's all there is." Naruko felt her stomach turn as she watched a man give what looked like his teenage daughter to a man in a wolf mask. In exchange, the man in the wolf mask gave the man a big bag of coins. Even though his daughter was crying, the man had left the scene right away. The wolf didn't care about the show. He put his arm on the girl's small of her back and started to lead her away. This was wrong. Nothing was right about this place. But hadn't Ino talked about the wolves and guessed about them with her brother? If these were the same wolves from Konoha, did that mean Konoha had a darker side she hadn't dared to think about? And if there was, how did her dear brother fit in? The number of guards had not been doubled, but tripled, and security had been stepped up to levels her clan had never seen before. And yet, they had still made it inside. In a situation that was the same as the last time, she came down from her room to find the representative sitting on the couch with two wolves on either side of her. If the representative of the wolves had been a man, she might have thought they were doing this on purpose, but she couldn't be sure that the young woman wasn't hoping to get a good look at her. She hoped, however, that this wasn't the case. Because, while it might have given her more options for negotiating, it could also have made things very awkward very quickly. She hated politics enough as it was. She didn't want them to get worse. As she sat down on one of her other couches, she looked around and saw that her friend had moved to the couch between the two groups and made himself comfortable. He must have decided after the first meeting that these three weren't a real threat to his home. Being the faithful friend that he was, he had put himself between them and his partner. Luckily, the couch meant he didn't have to give up comfort to do it. Sume could have sworn the two guards almost looked amused by it. The nameless representative, on the other hand, seemed as calm and collected as usual. They all sat in silence for a moment, Kuromaru staring at the wolves and the representative locking eyes, or eyeholes, with the matriarch of the Inuzuka. Silence, unfortunately, didn't have much to do with their business at the time. As a result, it was quickly broken by a soft female voice. Sume, as alpha of the Inuzuka pack, you have had a lot of time. Have you made a decision yet? That wasn't even a question. Of course she did. Even though she didn't want to admit it, she had decided on her choice from the first day she heard about the offer. Even so, she couldn't help the nervousness that was building up inside her. She had been waiting for this day and was ready to take her clan to new heights, but there was a question that kept niggling at the back of her mind and planted seeds of doubt in her heart. This was a perfect chance, maybe too perfect. She didn't really know the wolves or what they wanted, so what would she really be dragging her clan into? And, more importantly, would her clan be able to take care of itself in this new world they might find themselves in? That made this feel more like a leap of faith than a solid business deal. She had an idea of what the benefits might be, but she had no idea what the risks were. Still, her heart is set on one option and one option only. She couldn't even consider the other one. I have. The representative looked very pleased by that, almost as if she knew exactly what she had been thinking. Tell me then, Sume, will the Inuzuka clan be joining our pack of wolves? She waited. This was it, the very moment that could change everything no matter what she did. But, like the clan leaders before her, she couldn't just rely on her thoughts. She couldn't do what she needed to do while she was thinking. No, she needed to trust her instincts and go with what felt right. Yes, we will. And those two simple words were all it took to change the future of her clan. It was a little scary to think that that was all it took to decide the lives of her entire clan. That didn't make saying them any less exciting. Her clan often called its best people wolves, but these were not members of her clan. These three before her were wolves, and her family were dogs. They belonged outside of Konoha, running and hunting, while her clan, which was tamed by comparison, belonged inside the walls of this great village. So that's why they had been chosen. Those inside would be the voice of those outside and act in their best interest. And in return, some of the hunt's spoils would be brought inside the walls for her clan to share. Wolves and dogs work together for no other reason than to take care of their packs and, in time, each other. The packs would stay strong. What they should be. I will tell Tsukiyomi-sama about your decision. I am sure he will be very happy with you and your clan. And there was a mention of the biggest unknown yet. She didn't know what the group's goals were, and she didn't even know what kind of person was running it, the kind of person she would be working with for the foreseeable future. If I work with your pack, will I ever get to meet the leader? Tsukiyomi-sama has chosen someone else to lead his pack, and I'm sure the two of you will meet again in the future, but I think you'd like to meet Tsukiyomi-sama himself. It is, but if I may ask a question, why doesn't he run his own pack? She could feel the smile that was forming behind her mask. Tsukiyomi-sama is not just in charge of the pack. The way it was said made it sound like he controlled more than just the wolves. Could he have a hand in other groups inside and outside of Konoha? She shivered at the thought that she was now one of these groups. She was so glad she had decided to help him, because if he got mad at her for not taking his offer, it could have been the end of her clan. So you're saying he has other people under his control? Yes, that's right. You may meet him in the future if this arrangement works out well enough, but that's not likely to happen for a while. Can you tell me what else he is involved in so I don't mess up his plans? The representative paused to think. As a general rule, the less she knew, the better. Even Sume knew that, but it was still a good point. They couldn't have the groups trip over themselves. Hinata was easy to control because her clan was private and her group was hidden, so no one had to worry about her doing something that could unintentionally, because Hinata wasn't going to cross Naruto on purpose, get in the way of the movements of another. But the more Naruto controlled, the more they would have to tell to keep things running smoothly. I guess I must, she finally decided. The Yamanaka are fair game right now because Uzumaki Kushina ruined his plans for them. This means the only group you need to watch out for in Konoha is a certain cult Tsukiyomi-sama has been ignoring. A cult? He's got a cult. Well, no, not him, but he does have the object of said cult, and they are very helpful. Sume could say honestly that she didn't really want to meet the man anymore. Whoever was pulling these strings was not to be trifled with. Oh, I see. So, where is this cult? Sume knew for sure that the representative was smirking, and she knew that was not a good sign. The cult currently has its roots in Clan Hyuga. She choked on air. The Hyuga? Yes, that's right. The cult isn't growing much right now, but that gives Tsukiyomi-sama time to finish up the wolf's current project before he starts fostering more growth. She was almost too afraid to ask, and what was he currently working on? Don't you remember? He's taking over a country. It wasn't supposed to happen so quickly, but recent events have moved his plans along quickly. I expect he'll have full control before the end of the month. Yes, she did say that last time, but he was supposed to be getting ready for a takeover, which could have taken years. For it to have moved up so quickly, it meant that something was going on. The death of a leader, a revolution, or a civil war, perhaps. Regardless, he was about to take control of a whole country and all of its resources. Even though a small country wouldn't be able to go up against Konoha, he didn't have to. All of those resources could be sent through clans inside the walls to be used against other clans. If things went bad, that same clan could leave Konoha and be given safe haven in a different country. If they were lucky, Konoha wouldn't even think that same country was behind it. That was very scary, but it was even worse to know that there was a Hyuga cult here and that the same person ran it. The representative said that her leader, Tsukiyomi-sama, had control over a large number of Hyuga, but if there was a cult, she could believe it. The Inuzuka were loyal by nature, while the Nara were lazy, but the Hyuga were almost fanatical. If the cult spread enough, it would be almost the same as a new clan leader. She never thought it was possible for the Hyuga, Konoha's strongest remaining clan, to have the support of a country and carry out the will of one man in the village. But it was happening and she was a part of it. By the gods, what have I done to myself? As the next page was turned, everyone in the clearing could hear a painful grunt. The point is to stay on the tree, Sasuke. You won't get anywhere if you keep falling off. He didn't need to look to know that the last loyal Uchiha was glaring at him from where he was sitting on the ground. Probably also upside down. It made him very happy. He really didn't know why he hadn't gotten a team sooner. It was so much fun to make them hate him, and as the battle with Zabuza showed, they were great handicaps. Maybe that wasn't too responsible of him, but maybe you didn't get the message that Hatake Kakashi doesn't care. Also, it was the kids who wanted to go on, so he would have been happy to turn around and lock himself in his house to read more. But no, the Uzumaki had to help the poor people of Wave, and Sasuke was dying to show his worth. He was partly to blame for that because he kept comparing his genin to Naruto, who many higher-ranking shinobi knew was both a natural and trained part-time with Azuki Yuga while he was in the academy, and they didn't like that for their own reasons. Was it just? No, did wanting to prove themselves help them on this mission? No, when he going to stop? Oh hell no. Hey, Sasuke? Yes, Kakashi-sensei? Do you know that dance move, the worm? Yes. I bet Naruto could do the worm up that tree while he was sleeping. You really are a letdown. The Uchiha's frustrated snarl was totally worth it. So, where was he? Oh, yes, continuing the mission. Sasuke had to prove himself to. Well, he didn't know who he had to prove himself to, but he had to, and he didn't know where Broody McBroodster was. Was that how Obito had seen him? He really hoped not. When his favorite pink sex toy. On that note, Sakura also followed him. If he didn't want to deal with an angry Kushina or council members who kissed the Uchiha's ass, they wouldn't even be here. Of course, that also meant that if anything bad happened to his genin, he was free to get the fuck out and put the blame on them instead of his careless leadership. Then again, whoever thought it would be a good idea to give a group of genin to a man who had spent a long time going on suicide missions to deal with his loss wasn't too smart. If nothing else, he might have an effect on the group, and that was a pretty interesting thought. Not like Orochimaru, or he would have to admit that Sakura might grow up well enough, at least in the ass department. Naruko would be beautiful, but she would be tied to her mother, so she wouldn't be available. What would be more interesting is the idea that the village's most valuable Uchiha and the Uzumaki princess and Jinchuriki daughter of Uzumaki Kushina and his late sensei would be going on suicide missions with council member Mabuki's daughter just for fun. Oh, to see the looks on the council members' faces if that happened. He'd have to keep his Sharingan ready, just in case, because that would be something he wouldn't want to forget. There was still a long way to go for his team before that could happen, but he had time. Lot of time. Though he'd probably spend most of it reading instead. Oh well, it seemed like a good trade to him. Sasuke hit the ground again and groaned in pain as he hit the ground. Sakura was in a nearby tree cheering him on, trying in vain to give him the confidence he needed to succeed and win his affection. He didn't need confidence. He was already arrogant enough for the whole team, which is probably why he couldn't learn to walk on trees. If Kakashi's suspicions were right, the only way to get Sasuke's love was for Sakura to become like a younger sister to him. And that wasn't happening anytime soon. Probably another reason he didn't have it down was that he didn't really have anything to push him to get better. Naruko had been taught by her mother, so she was given the job of guarding Tazuna and sometimes his beautiful daughter Tsunami. He'd have to figure out how to tap that before his team left. This left Sakura, whose weak reserves made it easy for her to get to the top. He should have her walk up and down the tree or try walking on water, considering where they were. Meh. She'd be just fine. Maybe. Then again, she didn't have much energy, so even if she did learn how to walk on water, she'd quickly run out and fall back into the water. The look on her face and the glare she'd give him after would be priceless. He'd have to save that one for later, and then he could have Sasuke join her. After all, 2 glances were better than 1. Naruko hadn't said she knew it yet, so maybe he'd be lucky and get all 3 of them to look at him. Of course, if we're talking about luck, he'd much rather put it towards Tsunami. Her A** was amazing. Hitaki fucking Kakashi. That goddamned bridge builder had managed to get the help of Hitaki fucking Kakashi himself. If that wasn't a sign of some god's love, he didn't know what was. Hitaki Kakashi grew up during the last war. Namikaze Minato taught him, and even though his Sharingan was a transplant, it was still scary. And then there were all the techniques he had been able to steal using them. There was a good reason he was an A-rank shinobi, and if he wanted to, he could easily get to S rank. By the grace of the gods, however, it seems like the man wasn't interested in more power and was happy where he was. Zabuza couldn't blame him. He was sure that if it weren't for the 3 genin, Hitaki would have pulled out some huge jutsu and destroyed the whole clearing they had been fighting in. He would not have even needed his Sharingan. Due to the sheer number of techniques he knew and the many ways he could combine them, as well as the fact that he was an amazing shinobi in his own right, he actually owed those kids his life, which was very embarrassing for him. If Kakashi hadn't had to protect them, he would be very dead. But even though he was alive, he still had a major problem. He was going to have to fight again. Quitting this mission sounded great right now, but his luck wasn't that good. Not only would he lose a lot of face with potential future employers when word got out, but he also knew that the resistance was still desperate for money. He might not care about their cause, but he cared a lot about Mei. If her group needed money, he'd get it for them, missing ninja or not. That turned out to be harder than it seemed. There weren't many jobs, and many of them didn't pay very well because they could get a shinobi from a village for the amount he would prefer. Zabuza, on the other hand, needed the job and didn't have any other offers to fall back on. This meant that his pay was cut a lot no matter where he went. This job, on the other hand, looked like it would pay pretty well, and he would finally be able to send some money to Mei and her small rebellion. Everything else he had made so far wasn't much more than what he needed to support himself and his student, Haku, while they looked for their next job. This finally made it look like his luck was going to change, but then. Hitaki fucking Kakashi. If he wasn't stuck in bed, he'd probably be going crazy right now, taking out his anger on anyone he came across. Then, this was probably for the best. Early on in his shinobi career, he learned that killing your client's troops was a bad idea and one of the quickest ways to get your contract cancelled. And Zabuza really couldn't afford that right now. Of course, he was only hired to get rid of the bridge builder, so he could send Haku to do it. He frowned at the thought. The kid was too soft, so he didn't think they would really be able to kill the old man. They could, though, take them away. Maybe Gato would pay him more if he brought him a living Tizuna. Not only would he get the pleasure of killing the man himself, but he could also make an example of him. Of course, it was possible that a rescue would be set up, but as long as Zabuza was paid, he could leave the country and go find his next job before that happened. Even though he hadn't seen Haku much lately, his student kept saying they were gathering herbs, but on the first trip they got enough to last a good month. Zabuza had the feeling that his luck was still running out. Even at this point, he wouldn't be too surprised if Haku ended up making friends with one of the genin. Given how bad his luck has been lately, the kid probably fell in love, too. What's next? One of those wolf fuckers ruining everyone's plans. At this rate, Zabuza was half expecting it. They were creepy people to begin with, and he couldn't figure out what they wanted. They were getting paid much less than he was, and he hadn't heard of them before. Something was wrong, and he had no idea what it might be. And, honestly, he didn't even want to know. No, what he really wanted was a couple bottles of sake, a few hookups, and to spend the rest of his days relaxing on a tropical beach. Zabuza was not that lucky, though. Because, as luck would have it, Momochi Zabuza was unlucky. Delicate fingers moved freely over pale skin. The few candles that were set up around the room gave off a flickering orange glow in the corners, giving just enough light to see in the dark of this private chamber. The skin shook, and soft, shallow breaths came out from between lips that were parted. Still, the fingers danced their way across the ivory canvas. It was a kind of ritual, even though it wasn't necessary, but it was done every time without fail. How would it not? Inch after inch was covered in feathery touches that didn't dare to stay, flitting from place to place with no real direction. They danced and moved to the beat of a song, like the excited beating of a new heart. The ritual was the same, and the music was the same, but the surface on which the dancers moved was completely new, and that was when they got to know each other. It was familiar, yes, because all flesh is, but it was also strange and almost foreign to the senses. It had all been felt a million times, but never like this. No, this was new, as it always was, and the familiar feeling gave the flesh new life. It had been a long time since their body felt like this, not just in terms of new feelings but also in terms of changes that didn't need to be seen or felt to be known. They had changed, as they always had, but they stayed the same. They would do this for days and days, running their fingers over their smooth skin and over strange curves, until they were sure that they knew every inch of their bodies better than anyone else who had ever lived. And so it went. The flickering of the candles drew the attention of two golden orbs to the picture they surrounded. On their own, their fingers kept moving down taut skin and soft flesh. They were watched by eyes made of amethyst that didn't blink. As they went on, every detail of the silent watcher was taken in. Pale skin and red hair, eyes like gems, and the smallest of smirks. He watched as fingers dipped between toned legs and others reached up to grab mounds of flesh that hadn't been there a week before. Soft gasps turned into pant gasps, and the delicate ritual was lost. When they saw their watcher, who they had only heard about in whispers, they felt a deep desire and need. They weren't whispers anymore. The sweet song filled the heart in a heaving chest gasping for precious air, and the flesh gave in to its desires. A voice joined the silent song, reverberating through their private chambers, as a pleasured scream tore its way from the throat and over red lips. Orochimaru had found freedom, but she wasn't satisfied. 3 days had passed since his dinner with the Yamanaka, and the right arrangements had been made. When you were a reserve of your rank, getting a month off was easy because you weren't expected to be needed anyway. A group of wolves were to take him to Wave to watch over the takeover, and it wouldn't take long after that for him to be satisfied that Sai was in charge of the port country. Of course, that meant he still had 2 weeks of vacation left, and that was a good thing. He couldn't just send his troops to Wave and expect people to accept it. Gato may have been able to do it for the past few years, but Naruto didn't want to keep it for himself. It was going to belong to the wolves until the world ended or someone got rid of them all. No, he'd need help. There was a thought. He had been helping out a lot of small groups, but now he needed help himself. He needed it from someone who could keep other countries at bay. Gato was happy to deal with everyone, but Naruto didn't have those contacts or the business skills to run a business. The larger villages avoided taking over Wave to avoid fighting with each other, but when they heard that Gato had died, they would all rush to fill the void and secure it for themselves, through a third party, of course, but Naruto wouldn't let them. So, even though they'd have control, which would make the villages hesitant, they wouldn't stay back for long. Hopefully, that delay would be long enough. Because, while the villages were trying to avoid fighting with each other, the daimyo of the different countries didn't have any problems with each other. Once one of the countries had wave, the others would be able to rule their own villages. Will they like it? No, but they weren't about to try anything that would risk their ability to trade through wave. There was really nothing but good to come from this situation. A daimyo could use wave to help their country's economy, and in exchange, Naruto and the wolves would have the support of that daimyo if anyone tried to challenge their rule. Of course, it was a little more complicated than that. One would actually have to call themselves daimyo of wave and then go to court to be officially recognized. But he was not going to just any court. No, he needed someone who could really back him up, so he had to go to one of the 6 big countries' imperial courts. With the approval of just one of the major daimyo, few people would try to dispute it, and those who did would have money problems after wave stopped helping them. As expected, once they were recognized, they would make a formal alliance with the country that recognized them. The borders between the two would be declared open and international taxes would be removed from any trade that took place across it. It was likely that a regiment of the daimyo's forces would be sent to the country to help protect it and make sure they were following the rules. Naruto didn't have to worry about that, though, because he was planning to work with the daimyo. He lost nothing from such and gained a powerful ally. He knew that Gado had a mansion and that he would probably give it to the daimyo so that his troops could stay there and he could stay there if he ever came to visit. That wasn't likely to happen, at least until wave got better, but anything could happen in the future, and having a foreign daimyo stay in your country just because they wanted to, whether they were an ally or not, could only look good. The fact that he wanted to become a more powerful daimyo would only make things better in his new country. Or perhaps Sai's new country. He hadn't really made up his mind yet. Sai was in charge of the wolves in Wave, and he would stay in charge after the place was fully taken over, but he didn't know if Sai could handle the job or even wanted it. On the other hand, he didn't really want to be a daimyo either. Sure, it would only really be in name, but names are powerful things. Then again, there was little reason for him not to. Yes, he'd rather become at least a chunin before he quits, but he could still be a shinobi even if he was the daimyo, especially if no one knew who he really was, except for the allied daimyo. You didn't want to keep that secret from them. Not if you wanted their support anyway. He could probably get Mai to take the job, but then she'd spend most of her time in Wave, which wasn't something he liked to think about. He thought that Keigo was also a choice, though it wasn't a good one. He had been showing that he was capable, but he didn't have the experience or social skills to be a leader. He was also more useful to Naruto and his wolves as he was. He was pretty sure Sai called the new position High Captain or something in one of his reports, but he'd honestly only skimmed it. If it was really important, it would have been brought immediately to his attention. Also, it wasn't his idea to give his wolves a few new ranks. He was happy with them the way they were. But if Sai wanted to set up his wolves in a different way, that was fine. He had given him free rein, after all. Naruto-sama. Hearing his name called pulled him out of his thoughts, but he didn't turn around to face the person who said it. His purple eyes went to the stone marker he was standing in front of, and he frowned. I was supposed to come see you, but here I am thinking about work. Gently he ran his hand over the top of the gray stone and with a sigh he turned from it. He would have to go back when his work was done and his mind was clear. At the very least, she deserved his full attention when he came to see her. Is everything ready, Sai? His appointed leader of the wolves gave a nod. Alright, we've got a long way to go, so let's get going. As he walked from the grassy field of the Konoha cemetery to the village proper, Sai fell into step quietly behind him. Everything had gone well, almost too well, but it was time to finish. Within a fortnight one of the final steps would be taken. And, if he was lucky, Nami no Kuni would be his. The chirping of birds and the laughter of kids playing in the park were mixed together. A cold wind blew through the branches of golden leaf trees that were on fire. Fall was really when the great Konohagakure no Sato lived. His spot at the stone table, which was usually in the shade from the trees around it, was now bathed in a warm orange glow that would make many people laugh at the irony. But the funny thing about his own seat wasn't what made him smile that day. It was more that the empty seat across from him, which was usually taken, was not shaded from the sun like his was. Because of this, it got all of the sun's light. People who didn't know better would usually make assumptions about good and evil based on how dark and light their seats were. But those who sat on those stone seats knew better. Now that both lights were on in some way, it was easier to see how the two regulars were alike. But neither of them really should have been in the light. Both of them were men of shadow, and they liked the real side of the shinobi world and how dark it was much more. They didn't want to live in the magical land of light. They would, however, act as if they were part of it as long as it was useful to them. It was no longer useful to him, but his younger self still used it in some ways. Not much, but some. He knew it wouldn't be long before the light showed everyone who really lived in the shadows they were so afraid of. But that wasn't today, so the figure didn't think much about it. His own plans had been made for decades, so he was safe in his position. There was no point in guessing about what would happen anyway. He thought that someone like him would come along at some point. A part of him that was more human told him that he was being replaced, but he had stopped seeing himself as human a long time ago. He was a shinobi, whether he was still working or not, and that made him a tool. But unlike other tools, he was more than able to use himself the right way. In fact, he was also good at using other tools. And that's how they knew which tools were important and which ones could be thrown away. He was important. Not for long, though. When he first saw the boy who looked so much like him, he realized that he was going to die. This made him think about his own death more than ever before. When he first talked to that boy, he was sure that there was someone else like him, that this world they called their own had given birth to someone else who lived in the real shadows of the shinobi world. He was getting close to dying. He knew this, and he had known this his whole life. This simple fact was always in the back of his mind. He was coming to an end, but the boy was just getting started. It was almost like the universe worked to make sure there was always someone hiding in the shadows. Then he realized how easy it would be to find someone else to do his job. He could fight as hard as he wanted, but one day he would die, and the day after that, no one would remember him at all. And that was when the planning began. Making his own organization structure less rigid and more flexible, like the one he was competing with. He didn't know if the boy had done it on purpose or just used what he thought would work best for him, but he did know that the structure he had chosen would only work if there was a strong person in charge of it. If he wasn't there, everything would fall apart. And that just wasn't okay. He was horrified by the idea that Konoha had a weakness in the form of one man who could destroy the roots and bring down the big tree. He had become a problem because of what he had done, and the village didn't know how much it depended on the roots hidden in the darkness of the shinobi world. His very presence was a threat to the village. Because there was no one else who could take his place, they couldn't rely on a single leader after he died. Instead, they had to be able to act on their own. Even though his emotional training hadn't completely taken away this ability, it had made it much harder for him to use. When he first started, it was a good trade-off, but now it was causing him a lot of trouble. One that he still wasn't sure how to solve. Don't even bring up the problems that would come up when the seals he put on his agents stopped working after he died. Trying to keep them all loyal while he was still alive would be hard enough. There wouldn't be much to keep them loyal besides what he taught them, but without a leader, that wouldn't do much. There was also the fact that they could tell anyone they wanted whatever information they wanted. No, if he didn't figure out a way to solve his problems, Root would end with his death. His dream for his whole life was meant to last much longer than he did. Good morning, Danzo Dono. He was so wrapped up in his own thoughts that he didn't hear anyone coming. If he had been 10 or 20 years younger, he would be kicking himself right now, but he just didn't have it in him anymore. He was both a shinobi and an old man. There would have to be a balance. When he looked at the young woman who sat down on the stone bench across from him, he couldn't help but think she looked familiar, and it didn't take him long to figure out who she was. Ah, my. It's been a while. This morning is lovely. It does. Danzo Dono, it does. May I ask why you came to see an old man like me on this beautiful day? Thank goodness, she said with a gentle smile. No, it's not business. Since Naruto-sama is busy with the wolves and their operations right now, I haven't had much to do, so I thought I'd go for a walk. I knew Naruto often came to see you for a few games, so I thought I'd stop by. The way she talked to him made it sound like she was saying she was on the same level as him, and the fact that she said Naruto was only with the wolves at the moment suggested she was in charge of them. But the fact that she said Naruto was above her made it sound like she thought the boy was more important than him. He wasn't sure if that should make him laugh or make him mad. Oh, I see. What could Naruto be doing that keeps him from stopping on his own? Well, you know, taking over a country. He stopped for just a second. Wow, that happened fast. That's Naruto-sama. Danzo turned his head slightly. Indeed. Now, about that game. I'd like to play against someone different. She gave him a smile. Great, I've already beaten the rest of the wolves and can't find anyone to challenge me. Even Naruto? He and the boy were about as good as each other, so if she was better than him, he was probably about to lose to a girl, and not because she was older. Even though he was old, he was still proud of himself. Naruto-sama doesn't really like the game, so I haven't been able to get him to play against me yet. That came as a big surprise, but it made him smile just a little. Naruto was definitely a good one. Mitarashi Anko was bored, which was not a good thing, as anyone in Konoha could tell you. Anko was dangerous when it was bored. Of course, they didn't have anything to worry about right now, since she was lying on her couch face down. The TV was on and tuned to some random show she hadn't bothered to find out what it was. It was the only noise in the otherwise quiet apartment. As she sighed and kicked her feet back and forth in the air, she did so in a lazy way. Days like this were very rare for the woman with purple hair, or at least they used to be. Since Kurenai joined a team, this has been happening more and more often. She helped her friend train her team on some days, which kept her busy, but she couldn't bother the Genjutsu mistress when she wasn't needed. She didn't have much to do at the TNI division anymore, and there weren't many missions that she liked that she could bring Naruto on. Even if there were missions, it wouldn't have helped now because he was gone. That was a bigger problem than not having enough missions, since she could have gone to his house to bother him. She liked lounging on his couch more than her own because she wasn't alone. Even if they were quiet while she was there, it was better for her to be there than to stay at home alone. She tried to go to his house before, but since no wolf was there to greet her and no one was home to answer the door, she couldn't really get in. She had hoped that even if Naruto wasn't around, she could spend some time with one of his wolves, like that cute young woman who was always with him. She was probably with him now, but that didn't stop Anko from hoping she could spend some time trying to make the girl feel bad about herself by talking about Naruto. She was usually so quiet and serious, but once Naruto came up, she was so easy to make fun of. It was also fun. Even Kurenai, who always tried to be so serious, would go out of her way to do it. Of course, none of this changed the fact that Anko was still so bored she couldn't stand it. She rolled over onto her back with a huff, crossed her arms over her chest, and pouted at the ceiling. She couldn't go see anyone. There hadn't been any new prisoners at work in a while, and she was already tired of the old ones. Worst of all, she couldn't blow anything up. Not now, at least. She couldn't buy a bunch of explosive tags and set them off randomly in a training ground or one of Konoha's forests until she got her next paycheck. There was something satisfying about a big explosion, but it was even better when Anbu ran around trying to figure out if the village was being attacked. No one to bleed, nothing to blow up, and she didn't even have enough money left to go buy dango. She was stuck with whatever was in her fridge. Since she usually ate out, which is probably why she had money problems, there wasn't much. Naruto probably had things in his refrigerator or cabinets. She knew that the gods above his wolves would never let him go without anything that they could give him. The only problem was getting in, of course. Then again, Mitarashi Anko had never given up when faced with a challenge. The wolves were probably with Naruto, and Mai was off somewhere, probably where Naruto was, so no one would try to stop her. Anko grabbed her shinobi gear and ran to Naruto's apartment. She was very happy with her brilliant plan. Maya would come back and find her in the middle of her break-in. She would shake her head at the woman and give her a spare key. Even though it would be a huge failure, she wasn't bored. And Konoha was thankful for that. Senbon of ice hit chains of chakra and fell to the ground in a pile that kept getting bigger. Next to her, Sasuke's eyes darted around quickly, trying to figure out where their opponent would move next. It's 1 o'clock on the second floor. Chains rushed toward the designated mirror, but they just missed it. The few senbon they could throw at that moment joined their siblings on the cold concrete of the unfinished bridge. When Naruko joined the fight, what had been a one-sided match between Sasuke and Zabuza's apprentice turned into a battle to the death. With her Uzumaki strength and ability to stop the senbon, she could keep doing this forever. On the other hand, Sasuke couldn't. His Sharingan, which was still young and had just been awakened, sucked chakra at an ungodly rate and made him worry that he would run out of chakra much sooner than was helpful. And if Sasuke fell, Naruko would have a hard time blocking the senbon coming at her. Then, the senbon would just have to hold off their opponent long enough for them to run out of chakra. The other team had already shown that they only needed one good shot. Naruko knew it was going to be close and that they would have to work well together to win. Even Sasuke knew that neither of them could do much against Zabuza's apprentice on their own. Even when they worked together, they could only dodge and block attacks. The other team didn't even look like it was trying very hard. Naruko thought that her only real chance to win was to send a quick look to her teammate. Her mother told her to keep it a secret for as long as possible, and she didn't want her teammates to judge her for it, but it didn't look like she had much of a choice. By making more chains, she stopped trying to attack at all and instead made a dome around them both. "Sasuke," she said. As soon as he looked at her, she went on. "I might know how to get us out of this, but it's dangerous. As soon as you see a way out, you need to leave so you don't get hurt." He was adamant. "This is my fight. This is our fight. If we lose, we die. You don't have to go protect Tazuna with Sakura, but you need to put some distance between us so you can join in when it's safe." "When will I know it's safe?" He didn't like the plan, but he didn't have a good reason to fight it. When he looked confused, she told him, "When I'm not in a chakra-fueled berserker rage." It was the first thing that came to mind. "It's an Uzumaki thing," she said, which wasn't completely wrong. "Some of your blood wakes up eyes that can copy techniques and read movements, and some of my blood makes my chakra go crazy and start tearing stuff apart. And, Kyuubi or not, that was a very Uzumaki thing to do. Not the chakra part, but they did tend to cause a lot of damage to things around them that didn't need to be done." Even though he was still looking at her strangely, he nodded. He had never heard of anything like that, but he didn't know much about the Uzumaki clan either. Also, since not every Uchiha turned on the Sharingan, it was possible that not as many Uzumaki ever used the power she said she had. He had to wonder, though. If she was going crazy because she was an Uzumaki, what were the chains? "Good, you got it." She reached down into her chakra and followed its path through her body until she reached her seal. She kept going until she lost herself in it and could feel the volatile chakra inside. She took one last deep breath and jumped right into it. It ate her up. As the corrosive chakra burned through her coils and leaked from her bleeding skin, she let out a tortured scream. Pain like what she had felt when she tried to use this power against her brother filled her mind and pushed away any semblance of logic. The cloak took shape, first with one tail and then with two, and her body changed to match. Her nails turned into claws, and her eyes got bigger. As her teeth got longer and sharper, the lines on her face where she had whiskers got deeper. The huge amount of chakra around her made her well-kept hair look more like rough fur as it rose slightly into the air. Sasuke only looked at her for a second before he knew why he had been told to run. This was no longer the Uzumaki princess, who was on his team. In fact, it wasn't even a person. This was a scary thing. Awe-inspiringly terrible and with power he hadn't even dared to dream of. It was absolutely lovely. Just like how her chakra burned the ground and scorched the air, his Sharingan burned that image of her into his mind for good. As the chains around them started to turn red and were thrown off balance by the sudden influx of unstable chakra, he didn't even have to think about what to do next. He listened. As he broke through the chains, which were coming apart quickly, he heard her roar like an angry god. Just like her chains, the mirrors couldn't stay on the physical plane in her presence, so they broke right away. As he ran through the ice rain, he turned around as soon as he was out of the area covered by the dome. His Sharingan protested when it was turned on, but he didn't care. He had to see this side of his teammate. He had to watch the rest of the battle and see what happened. He would not be going back into battle, but he was not going to miss it, no matter what. Every part of her body hurt, and her insides seemed to be melting. When she tried to use the power against her brother, she felt pain for a moment, but it was nothing compared to the pain she felt when she had to keep the cloak on. She cried until her tears turned into a cloud of mist that made it hard for her to see. She could only see red, so it didn't really matter. Another roar ripped from her bloody lips and knocked her opponent back. With a big leap and a wild swipe of her claws through the air, she pounced on her prey with a crunch. The first blows she threw broke the angry white mask, but one look at the face underneath took the red out of her eyes. Without her will forcing the Kyuubi's chakra through her body, her own chakra quickly got rid of it, leaving her weak and tired. She couldn't help but say the person's name as she stared at them for a long time. "Haku," they replied with a small, sad smile. "You're a lot stronger than I thought, Naruko-chan. I probably shouldn't have been so cautious." "Why?" The rest of the question wasn't said, but it was clear enough what was meant. "For Zabuza, my dear one," was all they had to say, and Naruko knew exactly how far people would go for those they cared about. A piercing scream ripped through the air, and then 1,000 birds began to chirp. Their attention was drawn to the blue light in the mist farther away. Even though neither of them could tell what was going on, it was clear that the two ranked shinobi were fighting. And just thinking about it was scary. And Naruko. It was pleading and told her that whatever was making that horrible sound wasn't Zabuza. Suddenly, she was confused. They were rivals, and Zabuza had to be beaten, but if she didn't do anything, she would be taking Haku's precious person away from him. There wasn't much else to say. Family was the most important thing to the Uzumaki. Even if it wasn't their family, she had to work hard to be able to raise her arm toward her sensei and his opponent. Because of his technique, she could only see Kakashi, but that would be enough. Chains of uncountable lengths shot out of her body, taking with them the last of her chakra. This last bit of chakra moved quickly through the air to form a wall in front of her sensei. She could feel them vibrating and breaking apart as he pierced them with his unknown technique, but he couldn't keep going. But it didn't stop the painful scream that was definitely not Kakashi's. She might have been able to stop Kakashi from going further, but his arm had gone far enough. Zabuza's chakra stopped keeping the mist around them going, so it went away. As expected, Kakashi was thrown up against a wall of chains, and his hand went through them. On the other side, not far from the chains, Zabuza was being held down by a pack of dogs while Kakashi's fingers were stuck in his chest. But it wasn't the fingers that were wrong. Chakra with a lightning nature was bad, and any technique that used it was always much more dangerous than it seemed. There was no doubt that the chakra had hurt the missing ninja very badly by forcing its way through his body. Naruko was sure that the man would have fallen over if it weren't for the dogs holding him still and the fingers stuck firmly in his skin. He was still alive, though, and that was the point. In fact, being alive but unable to move was better than anything she could have hoped for. Not only did she not stop Kakashi from doing what needed to be done to keep the client safe, but Haku's most important person was still alive. It was clear that they also appreciated it because a hand gently turned her face back to the opponent she was on top of, and their grateful lips quickly met hers. Even though the kiss was only a second long, the shock was much longer. "Thank you, Naruko-chan." Haku's smile, on the other hand, made it all worth it. Nothing made her happier than seeing someone else happy. She might have kept thinking if there hadn't been so much noise on the other side of the bridge. The sight that came out of the slowly disappearing mist of Zabuza made stomachs drop. Gato stood in front of the group of thugs like a leader and smiled at the tired shinobi. The group of thugs was probably more than 100 strong. The most intimidating thing, though, was the figure next to him. The High Captain of the Wolves was easy to spot. He had his hood up in a mantle of snow-white fur that moved in the sea breeze. Even though the thugs behind him were laughing and Gato was grinning widely, he stayed still and didn't move. He was like a strong statue that everyone could feel. It was easy to see why the hired muscle was so sure of himself at the time. If such a man was on your side, you might feel like you couldn't lose. But when something moved on the other side of the bridge, the thugs went quiet and Gato's face got very sad. Even as Tazuna was being led back behind, Kakashi and Sasuke went to stand over his downed teammate and her opponent to protect them. The villagers of Nami no Kuni let everyone know they were there. A wolf's snarling face didn't scare them too much, and a few of them were seen looking around for more. They knew that the pack was always nearby. They were right, too. Mist grew thick around the bridge and stuck to the cold cement like a million tiny hands caressing a lover. These figurative hands were quickly replaced by real hands that grabbed any free space they could and pulled up the wolves' clear shape. They crawled over the edges of the bridge as easily as the fog, with an unnatural grace that was more about how they were than how they moved. Instead of standing like the rest of Gato's troops, they crouched on the raised sides of the bridge and held one of the weapons they carried in their hands. Of course, this gave Gato and his troops more courage. "Hey, Zabuza, it looks like you weren't much a demon after all. I think it's safe to say that the contract is over with this latest failure, so it's up to us boys to clean up this mess, right?" Behind him, all of his troops gave a big cheer. "Gato, you jerk, I'll get you for this," Zabuza said in a barely audible growl that made the businessman laugh. "When my boys are done with you, neither you nor that small group of villagers will be able to do anything. Wave is mine, and if they can't accept it, I'll just have to get rid of them." The bad guys laughed even louder, and the villagers got ready. Then came laughs that were deeper and darker. Like a group of demons, they sang for fun, and their songs were full of bad intentions and promises of cruelty. The wolves laughed and shook their shoulders all around the thugs. Some of them threw their heads back and let out horrifying howls into the air. Gato was scared by how they were acting, but he didn't want to stop them, so he pointed at the crowd of villagers to tell the demons who were acting like wolves where to go. Okay, you can kill them however you want. Anyone who brings me the head of a shinobi gets a bonus, and you can keep any women you catch. Another loud cheer came from the thugs as they got ready to do what they were told. The blades moved down. They flashed through the air like lightning and fell like a rain of death, digging deep into the bodies of those they hit. Blood was coming out as fast as screams. There was never a dull moment. Gato turned to look at his forces as a cold fear grew in his chest. Or what his forces were. Those who weren't killed in the first attack were helpless as the wolves, who were supposed to be under his control, killed everyone else around them. Soon after, they joined them. Gato slowly turned away from the view and looked at the High Captain. His mosque's dark laugh told him everything he needed to know. Me and your leader made a deal. You can't do this. Poor Gato. You were wrong to think that a lazy cat like you could ever play with the wolves. Then there was a bark of laughter. You also did something even worse. Wave doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the wolves. Tsukiyomi-sama wants you to be quiet. With just one swipe of his tanto, the shinobi was able to take the tycoon's head off his shoulders. He caught the head with skill and held it high with pride, first to his fellow wolves and then to the people of Wave who had gathered. From now on, Nami no Kuni is under the protection of the wolves by the grace and command of Tsukiyomi-sama. People who had been helped by the wolves were quiet for only a moment before they started to cheer. It didn't take long for everyone to join in. Gato was dead, and they were told they would be safe. It was the best deal they could have asked for. The wolves of Wave. It started with a single cry, but the freed villagers soon said it over and over again. As the people of Wave started to celebrate and the wolves started cleaning the bodies off the bridge, a ball of fire appeared in the sky above Gato's house. More and more people cheered. Behind his mask, Keigo smirked. I think Naruto-sama would be happy. 2 days had passed since the death of Gato and the takeover of the wolves. If Kakashi was telling the truth, things were going pretty well for the villagers right now. After a night and day of partying, the wolves asked the people of Wave to keep building the bridge, which they were happy to do. The wolves took a lot of supplies from Gato's warehouses and gave them to the few sailors who were still in Wave. They also gave them ships. Gato's things were already being packed up to be sent to whoever bought them. But when it came to the wolves, there was still a feeling of unease. People in Wave may have accepted their saviors, but Kakashi was a shinobi, so something didn't feel right. From what the leader of the pack, the High Captain, as Gato had heard them called, told him, he could tell that this had been planned for a while. He also said something about a Tsukiyomi-sama, which meant that the High Captain wasn't in charge and was being told what to do by someone else. Another person who wanted to see Wave just like Gato. He couldn't say whether Wave's new ruler would be good or bad, and it wasn't his business to say either way. His job was to protect the bridge builder while he worked on the bridge. He could tell that the wolves wanted that bridge built and would make sure it was done. His mission had been hijacked. Officially, too, because Tazuna decided to trust the wolves and said that Team 7's mission was done. That was great for Kakashi because it meant he could go home and look at his Icha collection again, but it still made him feel bad. Shinobi were always suspicious, so that couldn't be helped. But there was something strange about the High Captain personally offering him any help he might need and then leaving with a salute. The Konoha salute.
I will continue the story in next part. Till then, we weeb offline.